So good morning or good afternoon, everyone. We had a few technical difficulties getting started, unfortunately, but here we are. And we have a great program for you today. I have a couple of very dynamic people that I'd like to introduce to you. First, we have Ray Cepeda, who is the founder and director of ABA Skills LLC in Asbury Park. He's the co-founder of 121 Learning Works in Pine Brook, New Jersey. Both are groups that provide behavioral consultation for children with autism to families, schools, and school districts in New York, New Jersey, Long Island, and Florida. Mr. Cepeda is currently in the process of opening Robinson Center for Learning for Students with Autism in Monmouth County, New Jersey. He's also a former clinic supervisor for the Lawvis Institute and has 25 years of experience supervising home-based programs as well as intensive treatment cases for learners on the autism spectrum that have yielded best outcomes. And some of those children that were intensively treated achieved typical education and intellectual functioning and no longer met the criteria of an autism diagnosis, which is amazing. He has worked in applied behavioral analysis schools, that specialize in the education and treatment of children with autism in both clinical, administrative roles, consulting with school-based programs, integrated and mainstreaming learners with autism into typical learning environments, training parents, and speaking on topics regarding the use of behavior analytics, teaching methodologies, and program individualization for children with autism. That's a mouthful, right? Sorry.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. Got to shorten that up a little bit.
Fantastic. Then we have Marcia Questel, She has been working with people with autism for 18 years. She began when a family member was diagnosed and has pursued finding and using the best practices in the behavior analytic field ever since. She uses high-quality evidence-based strategies while promoting motivation and engagement from clients through fun and creative programming. She is the clinical director of the Robinson Center for Learning, as well as a consultant for 121 Learning Works. She designs home-based programs and supervises home-based therapy teams. She conducts parent training sessions and school observations and supports schools through staff development training. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
So today
Thank you.
Thank you. And by the way, I'm Stephanie Hunnell from the Hunnell Law Group, and I am a family law attorney with 16 years of experience in the field. So I wanted to put together a group of people that we can ask some questions regarding co-parenting, especially geared towards co-parenting during this pandemic where people are afraid of sending their children to the other person's house or have concerns of how to transition the child. And I think that's especially true when we have children with autism or other learning disabilities. So I wanted to ask both of you a question. What is the potential harm that you can see if you either don't send a child or do send a child? This is just a broad kind of a question to get this going.
Okay, on not sending a child, there is obviously an issue of respite for the parent that has the child with them all day, every day. That they're not getting a break, that they're not getting any circle of support around them, because a lot of families are dealing with not having therapists right now, not having anything but remote support, and that's extremely difficult. So I think I would be most concerned of a child not going with their other parent due to like mental health for the parent and the child being kind of stuck inside all day and going in the same circles. And in terms of going, obviously that opens up, for inconsistencies across both parents.
Got it. Is there a way to transition or make the transition more smooth between the two households?
Definitely. And Ray, let me know whenever you want to jump in. But between both households,
yeah, sure.
between both households, I think the first thing to do would be to come up with a plan proactively before it ever occurs. So that would mean you'd have to have a good open line of communication between both parents, which is sometimes very difficult in these situations, of course. But if they could come to the table remotely and hash out some of their concerns in a calm and meaningful way, then they could probably proactively plan ahead for the transition so that it's as smooth as possible. And that's going to be really important in terms of planning for the routine and for, maintaining as much stability as possible.
So a lot of like parent preparedness would be important or key.
When it comes to kids with autism, there's nothing more true than a stitch in time saves 9. If you are prepared, you're saving yourself from a domino effect of issues that you're not prepared for. And when you're reacting and constantly putting out fires, you could end up doing more harm than good because you're just tripping over yourself while scrambling to get things done. And then you're dealing with the stress of it, which, I already know a lot of parents have guilt that they're working through all the time, feeling like they're not doing enough or not doing the right things. And that just ends up feeding into a cycle of, tripping over yourself more and not being, you can't do this only reactively. You just can't. You have to sit down, have some time, which is of course difficult enough, but have some open communication and do some serious planning, hashing out well, what if this and what if that? Because sometimes when you're talking to a co-parent and they may have a completely different parenting style than you, if you're talking to them about what you're doing in your house and how you need there to be some consistency, sometimes their immediate reaction is their own anxieties and their own struggles. So they'll come out saying like, well, what about this and what about that? And when he's here or when she's here, they always do this. And just being really patient and trying to work through answering all of those questions will, I think, help to make the plan easier. It's about being really patient and very understanding. And right now, everyone is kind of living at the edge of their seat anyway. So there's already a much thinner threshold for frustration.
Right.
Yeah.
And so just to piggyback on that, one of the things that I'm thinking is if a child has to go between two different households, I think what would typically happen is, like Marcia was saying, one parent might be more structured than the other or have stronger opinions and tell the other parent, here's what you should be doing. As hard as it is to avoid doing that, I would just avoid doing that so that if you're the parent that's more structured, then what's going to happen is the child will behave better in your home than in the other parent's home. And then the challenge is going to be the transition back from the less structured home to your home, which as long as you are proactive, you remind the child, here's what the rules are, here are the expectations, here's the structure that we have, are we on the same page? And the child's probably going to say yes. And then you're still going to get a day or two of some shenanigans, some increase in challenges, but then they'll settle back in. So, I mean, I just think it's not worth it to argue with the other parent about what's going on in their house, because based on the individual, they may actually just do the opposite of what you suggest anyway, because of the dynamic between the two parents.
Yeah, in the divorce context, I mean, on a normal day, I get conversations and calls all the time about not wanting to send a child because when they come back, they are mouthy or unruly. They don't do their chores. They don't want to go to sleep on time. I mean, any number of things that a parent could complain about, they're complaining about for a few days. And they always say it takes a couple of days. So I think in a normal circumstance, what you're saying is really important, these conversations with the children also when they're coming back.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Because we just have to expect that the child's going to have some challenges transitioning back into the more structured house. So and it's so easy for me to say to a parent, don't be frustrated, don't be upset, everything's going to be fine. So please feel free to be frustrated and to be upset, but I would avoid trying to exert some control over the child, because that will just make that transition period longer. Just accept that there's going to be a transition period, and as things start to smooth out, then I would increase the amount of praise and attention, etc., until things just got back to quote unquote normal for that house.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I also like the comment about realizing that you shouldn't get frustrated with the other parent, because you're not really going to change them, and by just being frustrated with them, they might push back. So kind of just accepting what you have and working within those parameters.
Right. So yes, and I think there's some bridge between these two ideas of being really proactive and planning as much as you can, and then kind of being hands off about what the other parent is doing. It definitely depends on the level and quality of communication between the two homes. But something that I'm always striving for in practice is to bridge the environment as much as possible. And sometimes there's a really clear line there of this is where the conversation ends, or this is where, you're not going to get any further with this person. And that's their boundary, I have been a co-parent for many years, and in the beginning it was extremely difficult, and now it's extremely easy. It's been almost 10 years of co-parenting, and I have to say the struggles that we had in the beginning were felt like forever. They felt like they were never going to change. They felt like they were never going to get better. And if you would have told me that 10 years later that things are going to be going super great and everyone talks and gets along and we even have parties together sometimes, I would have said you're insane, and so that I would never do that. I wasn't ready to cross that bridge either. But at this point, everybody really gets along really well. Everyone is super civil. So it is important, I think, to persist in being hopeful as much as possible while also dealing with your reality. And a professor of mine once said, "Don't shit on me." And he meant that to sound funny. And he said, "Don't shit on me, don't shit on yourself, don't shit on other people." And I said, I'm never going to forget that ever. And it's come into my mind a lot when I feel like I am imposing on my ex's parenting style. I can't shit on him. I can't tell him what he has to do. I can just say, this is how I'm doing it at home. And if you want to, promote some cohesion, then, try it out. Let me know if it works for you. And if it doesn't, maybe we can think of something else, and I can adjust what I'm doing. Let's say, maybe, if it will work out for everybody. And if not, then yes, you just deal with the behaviors that happen when you get home. And so on that note, just accepting, like Ray said, just accepting that this is going to happen, right? When you go on vacation, your first day back to work is very hard. You're not in the groove of working as fast, working as diligently, being, really aggressive and tackling issues. You're honeymooning a little bit. You're still coming into the groove of like, oh, this is what's expected of me. So same thing, and keeping that.
Getting ready for today.
Yeah. So, we all have a lot to deal with right now in terms of like creating a false structure that we're just not used to imposing on ourselves and our families. But doing so is really beneficial for everybody in the home. And so having that in place and just dealing with like okay, obviously he's going to be, or she's going to be having some behaviors that are not typically so intense or so often. And here's how I'm going to deal with it. And making a plan for yourself. Again, that proactive end never goes away. You
Right.
will afford yourself so much more peace of mind by being ready and thinking out the different circumstances, instead of just reacting. So just
Right.
expecting, like, yeah, my kid's going to have more behavior. That's what's going to happen. And here's how I'm going to deal with it. One suggestion might be, like, do not actually change your structure at all, because that might lead to more pulling that thread from your child. Like, oh, I got away with this. Let me see. And, kind of discovering where the boundary is on their end. If we don't create structure, children instinctively look for it, not even consciously. And so they try to figure out, where is that line? And you don't want to keep moving it. You don't want to keep moving the finish line of, like, oh, you have to keep trying a little harder to get a reward, or you have to keep having more behavior in order to meet a consequence. So just keeping your structure the way it is, but knowing you're going to have to impose that structure a little bit more. You're going to have to deliver consequences a little bit more once they come home, while also being patient about it and understanding that you have to provide a little bit more warning, a little bit more reinforcement when they're doing the right things, taking the opportunity to have a heightened awareness of their good efforts, and making sure you're praising and rewarding those, and making the counterbalance also, heavy-handed, so that you're not just imposing punishment, but that you're imposing more and more praise and benefit for doing the right things. That's also a really good strategy, proactively.
How does that mesh with what's going on right now, where there is a complete change of our day-to-day life? So students would normally be going to school, teachers would be imposing their IEPs and 504s, and they would have that specific structure, which it just can't exist right now. So how do we balance that, and how do we talk to our kids about, I guess specifically about COVID-19 as well? Is that a conversation that goes into the reason why the structure has changed?
Yeah, I think that depends on the learner. Some children with disabilities are not necessarily gonna have an understanding of germs and viruses and social distancing, but some are totally capable of understanding some more abstract concepts like that. And also, it depends on their awareness of time. How long is this going to last? Some students and some children live extremely presently and don't necessarily have an idea of long-term consequences or days versus weeks. So your conversation with your child is going to depend a lot on their level of awareness. But if they have some sense and are of these things and are asking questions, or seem to really be thirsty for information, then of course having a conversation with them is going to really be important.
Right. So there are a lot of good resources, like on PBS Kids, and I think that we even put some out on our social media about how to talk to kids about COVID-19, and they're animated or there are social stories, and these things are good for not only our kids with IEPs and 504s, but also typically developing kids as well. So yes, I definitely think that if your child can understand and grasp the concept of what's going on via pictures, via explanation, via story, yes, go ahead and do that. So I just had this conversation with a mom yesterday whose son is doing really well at school and at home with the structure, and now he's doing horribly and completely falling apart because now there's no structure. Both mom and dad do work from home or have the option to work from home. So they're trying to figure out, how can I make this situation work? Now, their son has autism, but um, just he has language, he understands rules, he can follow the rules, he can manage himself if he wanted to, but he also has a repertoire of a lot of non-contextual vocalizations, a lot of self-stimulatory motor movements, and so his parents reported that when they said it's time for mommy school, because that's what mom calls work time at home, he would immediately say, no mommy school, and then go running in the opposite direction. So he's like, so how do I try to structure his 8-hour, 12-hour day to minimize not only the challenging behaviors, but the fact is that he's going to regress because he doesn't have the treatment now. He doesn't have therapy. He doesn't have school. He doesn't have his services, and he's
Right.
spending a lot of time doing things that he shouldn't be doing. All right. So, but my answer was, you can't. Here's what you can do. When you can engage him, follow the rules and the parameters that we've established, and then you're going to have to send him on his merry way to do whatever it is that he's going to do. Now, this is a child that is not at risk for hurting himself or other people. Worst case scenario is he's going to go in his room and, jump on his bed, and he laughs and he talks about bubble guppies and things like that. But then when it's time to work, you bring out his token system, bring out the reward system, follow the rules that we've established. So he knows that when it's time to work, then it's just time to work. And then when it's time for him to play, it's just time for him to play. And honestly, I feel strongly that kids are probably not going back to school for the rest of the school year.
Yeah.
So I tell her not to panic if this doesn't work the first day. It's just, let's look at it as like a process over time. Let's see if we can work for 5 minutes, then give them a break. See if you can work for 7 minutes, give them a break. See if you can work for 10 minutes, give them a break. And so the way that I think that would translate to typically developing kids is, obviously they understand rules and obviously they can work for longer periods of time, but that doesn't mean that they have to. And so while we've all talked about how much screen time should kids have, well, this is just my 2 cents, is I think it's totally fine that under the current conditions, if you have multiple kids in the house or you have one child that might be a little more active than other kids, then screen time can supplement as good reward and transition for going from activity to activity. First, you're going to do this, then you can have some screen time. Then we're going to do these 2 things, then you're going to have some screen time. And then I had another conversation with a mom whose son is significantly older, who unfortunately has no functional communication system, has no leisure skills, like really can't do a whole lot. And she's like, well, what am I supposed to do? So we talked about some big picture things about securing services for him. But in the meantime, my suggestion was try to get him to help out with the things that you need to be doing to whatever extent possible that he can. He does communicate via an iPad, and always make sure the iPad is with him and encourage him to communicate to you what his wants and needs are, that he wants a break, he wants something to eat, he wants a drink, he has to go to the bathroom, etc. And then when you have to do something, just let him go and do what he's going to do.
Right.
And then when it's time for you to place more demands on him, whether to cook, to clean, to help out around the house, to go outside, to go for a walk, you can use a timer, you can give him a countdown, you can give him warnings in 10 minutes, in 5 minutes, in 2 minutes. Okay, it's time to go. And so these are all things that can be incorporated into a child's everyday schedule, regardless of whether they have any challenges or not. Does that all make sense?
Yes.
I'm gonna add to that because I just want to let people know about stimulus control. When students are going to school, they have so many types of stimuli that lead them to the whole idea of school. So they have a bus or they have a building that they arrive to, and then they have to get into a classroom, and the classroom itself has a whole bunch of relevant stimuli, and the teacher, and all of these things lead to this matched set of behaviors in this particular context, right? That's all gone. So it's about creating stimuli that are matched with a set of behaviors. And so what Ray is saying is, letting them know that this is work time and this is not work time. And when you see these books out, or when we sit at this table, or when you see this thing, this means it's work time. And eventually that set of stimuli will be matched with that set of behaviors, right? And it's about how do we make sure that the kids learn, oh, I engage in these behaviors when I see these stimuli out at the house.
Right.
And for some people, you might have a separate room. If you have a room that you can utilize, or a section of a room, or a particular table for working, that would be a little bit easier and better than using the kitchen table, which is usually for socializing and chit chat and snacks and crafts and like doing whatever. If you have to use the kitchen table, then maybe you can set out a particular color card. So like, I don't want to say red because that's associated with negative things for some people, but maybe, a light blue card that says time to work on it. And you set that out at the table, and you start placing some pretty simple demands. And if you have to use a token economy with your child, use that token economy, and that token economy with the blue work card would be matched together. And if you can, then give them some breaks. And one thing that I suggested in an article I wrote recently about homeschooling tips is to absolutely start with maintenance and quick and easy activities, because diving into harder skills, diving into like the last target that your therapist left off with is not the way to go, because more than likely you don't have the instructional control of that therapist, because you're a parent. And also, if you don't have experience in running it yourself, you're still figuring it out. So it'd be much better for both of you to start like way in the beginning of whatever program you're running, or way in the beginning of whatever academic thing you're doing. Like, do some mastered addition if your child can already multiply. Do some mastered multiplication and division, like the early 2s and 5s if your kid is up to doing harder math facts. Doing that will show them like, I'm going to do something quick when I see that it's time to work. It's not going to be too horrible. And then I get to take a break, and then bringing them back and get them used to that, coming to the table and doing some things with you, because it's totally different for them. And all of that stimuli does not mean work yet. They're not used to exhibiting all of the school behaviors in this setting with these people. So you have to really change over the expectation in a systematic fashion, so that those stimuli, when they see them, or when you deliver that instruction of it's time to work, they will then pair that with success and the ability to gain rewards or breaks. Not, oh my gosh, my mom is going to be fighting with me, and then it's going to be too hard and I'm going to get yelled at or whatever.
Schools are jumping in.
Approaching the table. Yeah.
Do you know if schools are jumping in to provide lesson plans or anything, and also specific to 504s or IEPs? I read an article, I think, but it's been a week, so things are changing so quickly. I don't know.
Things are changing really rapidly. I think districts are starting to catch up. Some districts had some homeschooling curricula out for neurotypical children way in the beginning. So as soon as school closed, they had day one homeschool ready to launch, which was overwhelming for those of us who are parenting those children. But some of them just shut down and said, we don't have anything yet and we're still working on it, even for kids who are just in regular ed. So the same like rollover is happening now for kids. And I know some children who are getting absolutely nothing. I know some children who are getting remote therapy sessions and telehealth through their districts. So it's really a mixed bag, and a lot of districts are struggling to provide services for kids.
Yeah, and I've been in touch with parents in different states, and it seems like there's three different things going on. One, they're getting the whole tele-education system set up. So maybe that'll start next week. There are other states where that system is set up, but only for their typically developing kids. So the kids that are in special ed might be getting packets sent home by their teachers or something, but there's nothing online available to them as of yet. And then there are other states. I've spoken with some parents where literally the parents have been told, well, we can't provide an equal education to typical kids as well as our kids with disabilities. Therefore, we're just going to call it a wash and we're not going to do anything. And so, I mean, I think that all three of those scenarios are challenging for all of our parents for different reasons, obviously. But I just want to just take that and then circle back to now you have a kid that's going between two different houses. So again, like what Marcia was saying, if you're going to be a structured parent, then the structure doesn't have to be engraved in stone. If you're lucky enough to have teleeducation through your school district and they're providing the work and they're providing some guidance, that's fantastic. Then that might ease some of the burden, but you still have to get your child to sit there and do the work, right? So, but really the structure would then come after their school time. But if you are a parent and your child goes between multiple homes and they are not structured in any way academically, and you are the only person that's doing it, exactly what Marcia was saying. It's a combination of easy work, hard work, doesn't have to always be the most challenging things. And if your child is able to help create their own schedule for the day, because it's optimal to be the same thing every day, but doesn't have to be. So if your child can participate in the creation of their own schedule, it's like you're getting buy-in on their own intervention, right, and you're allowing them to negotiate, to be flexible. You want them to do 20 minutes of math. They only want to do 5 minutes, and you agree on 15 minutes. Wow, that's great. So like now they know already what the expectation is. So while I know that we're focusing more on kids with disabilities and 504 plans, all of these same strategies I feel strongly work very well for typically developing kids, because I'm working with parents whose siblings of the kids that I'm actually contracted to work with are home, and they're like, well, what am I going to do with all two, with these three, with these four? Like, well, here's kind of like what you're going to have to do. And getting them to create their own schedules, get the work done, because obviously kids want to do all the easiest stuff and the most fun stuff first. Well, that's going to go on maybe for about a week. And then they're going to realize, so what I'm saying is let them do that, because then they're going to fuss and then they're going to argue. I don't want to do that because everyone's going to save their hardest thing for last. Well, that then after a week of doing that, it offers you, the parent, the opportunity to then say, hey, remember last week when you saved your math work for last and you really didn't want to do that? Why don't we just try to get that done first? You don't have to do all 20 minutes. Why don't we do 10 minutes? Let's do a couple things you like. We'll do another 10 minutes, and then all of your math is going to be done, and then we can just work on the rest of the schedule together. So that's something to think of as well. And if the other parent does not do that, it may actually set the child up to actually make the initiation, if they're capable of doing, to say, hey, can we make a schedule? Because they're already in the habit of making their own schedule instead of just having an adult impose one on them.
Right. And there's plenty of research to support that when someone is making their own schedule, that they have much more engagement and are much more productive. So with that being said, there may be some boundaries. Like if you're doing a remote class with a teacher at 11 o'clock, the kid can't not feel like it at the moment, right? Because it's on, it's happening live. So depending on level of ability, you can tell a child, like, here's all of your options, you pick and make your own schedule from that. Or for things like this that have a set time that they have to happen, or if you for yourself need to get like work done and they need to be sitting and doing a certain thing so that you can be with another child or be on a phone call with a colleague, you can fill in pieces of it and tell them fill in the blanks, because then they still have some level of control that increases their level of engagement. But you're saying, at this time you do have to do these things. In between, you pick from this list or this picture set. If you have little cards that you're letting them use, you can use drawings on index cards. You can take pictures of things if you have a home printer. For there's many ways to do it versus across many levels of ability, and making it work for you while also promoting a level of independence and engagement from them is the goal. You have to balance those two things, because think about it. If your boss hits you in the morning with, we're doing this today, you're already, let me get my coffee first. There's a little bit of pushback. But if your boss is like, hey, can you try to get X, Y, and Z done today? Okay, yeah, I can do that, and having some level of control on what you're doing really helps to keep you on task longer and better.
And are there any lists of resources or sites or any place that we can go to find more information about maybe lesson plans or these kind of things, so we can have a lot of options for our kids to pick from?
Yeah. I have a whole article that I've made, and I can give that to you to send out to people, or I can just, I guess we can direct them to my email if anyone wants to ask me.
We can maybe post it. Is it shareable? We can post it in the links below, or we can post it on the event page or something.
Yes, we can do that for sure.
Yeah, we can do that. And also, one of our social media people also put together a Google Doc that has tons of links to all kinds of sites that parents can be accessing from home. And some are free, some you have to join up, some you have, et cetera. Some are easier to use than others, but at least the resources are there. And we'll be more than happy to put that link up so that everyone can access it.
Perfect. I'm just looking at some other questions that we have. One question that I was getting from a parent who lives in kind of like a gated type community, and when his kids are outside playing, other kids want to come out, and they're trying very hard to socially distance themselves from their neighbors as well. And the children don't really understand. They're 5 and 4, or 6 and 4. So how do you have those kind of, it's just a little small conversation. How would you recommend having a conversation with your child about why they're not playing with their friend when they're as little drama as possible, because they had a complete meltdown?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, so again, there are a number of visual social stories that can help explain what's going on. But I think that the bigger picture, Stephanie, is parents have to be communicating with other parents so that that temptation isn't even there. If there are kids riding around on their bikes in a neighborhood and they're not supposed to be because of social distancing, I'm not saying to reprimand other parents, but try to be proactive to say, hey, Joey's going to be in the house for, the foreseeable future. So, can you please ask little, Johnny and Judy to not come by and knock on the door with their bikes. But otherwise, I mean, look, kids are going to be disappointed. Of course they're going to be disappointed. Of course they're going to tantrum. They want to be with their friends. Even if they understand that they could get sick from going outside with their friends, that's an abstract concept. There's nothing salient in the environment for them to latch onto unless they actually get sick. And then you say, oh, well, you got sick because you were playing with them. And no one's looking for that. So the bottom line is again, try to be proactive. Use social stories, use good, clear explanations, talk in bullet points so that the kids understand, and they're still going to whine, and they're still going to fuss, and they're still going to complain. But you know what? Tell them it's okay to be upset. You know what? It's totally fine, because I'd be upset too if I wanted to go see my friends and someone's telling me, you absolutely cannot go be with your friends because this, and that are going to happen. And then you know what? You just have to comfort them, console them, try to redirect them to do something that they actually do like to do, and try to also compete with their motivation to engage in those behaviors or to access their friends by setting up a Zoom with their friends, doing online games with their friends. So it's not that they can't see their friends, it's that they just can't be in physical close proximity to them. So there are these other ways of doing that too. And again, let's expect the kids to fuss, to whine, to cry, to tantrum, and just let them go ahead and do it, because
Right.
they're not going to not have those feelings. So let them have those feelings and then say, but you know what? Let's, why do we, like if your kid's 5, set up a game of Cards Against Humanity. No, I'm just kidding. You're not going to do it. No, but if they're young, you see what I'm saying. Is that you want them
Yeah, sure.
online, seeing their friends, talking to them, let them talk to their friends about how disappointed they are that they can't see them, and facilitate a conversation about how, the things that they do want to be doing once they actually can see them, etc. I mean, that would just be my 2 cents.
Yes. By the way, just from my perspective, I already feel anxious that I haven't seen people in person in a while.
Right.
So as a child, I can only imagine. And I set up my first, we called it a little happy hour that we had last Friday, where several of us got online on a Zoom, and we just sat around and talked and had a drink and ate, and it actually made me feel a little more normal. So yeah, I mean, of anxiety and anxiousness and cabin fever or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, so I can totally imagine doing that with kids as well.
Sure.
And think about how long summers were when you were little. Right now, I'm already planning for September, because as adults, time goes by so much faster. And on the flip side, summers are long, but like this situation is long, and for them, it feels like forever. And so we do have to validate and understand their emotions, because they are real and they are right. This sucks, right? But validate it and then say, and here's what we're going to do about it. We're going to keep a safe distance from people, but we're also going to be able to have a lot of fun. Does that make it better? No, I'm not trying to tell you that like it's okay and that everything's fine. It's, you don't want to argue with them and tell them like not to have those feelings, but validating their feelings and then just letting them know, okay, and these are the cards we are dealt, and how are we going to play them? One thing that a lot of neighborhoods are doing is they're putting up window walks. So they have their kids draw a themed picture. Like right now, my neighborhood is doing silly faces, I think. So you make a silly face on a big piece of paper and tape it up in the window. And when the kids are on their bikes or walking around, they can see each other's stuff. Also chalk, like if the Joey can write like, hey, Johnny, what's up? And then another kid comes over when he's not outside and writes back to him on the driveway. That's something that they can communicate through. That's like a secret message or something like that. Right. Some people are still sending mail. I'm a little bit, I don't know about pen pals. But, and then other kids are allowing kicking a ball because no one's touching it. But then of course, if it goes like over a fence, someone has to go get it. So, there's some level of like supervision that you need to have if you're going to be allowing any distant thing. But some kids are capable of keeping a distance while they're still outside. I know like my kids have a very clear line of like, you don't go past this line. My neighbors are next door and they're very similar ages and they also know the rules. So they talk to each other from each other's driveways, and they're like, look what I'm drawing over here on the driveway. And the other one said, oh, I did that yesterday, whatever, so they go on their bikes and they can also zoom past each other and like, see how fast they can go. So there's like some level of interaction when they're outside, as long as they're far apart. And then some people are doing things through windows. I don't know if you've seen that, but like even with elderly people, they're like going to visit them so that they're not alone, but just like communicating through the window. Yeah,
I
so
saw-
like you could give them little dry erase markers and let them play tic-tac-toe through the window or something like that, that if you have like a glass door.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I saw a couple of things like on CBS or something with some students that played instruments. They went to neighbors' houses and played instruments on their front yard, in their front yard, and enjoyed the music and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we're finding a lot of creative ways as a society, I think, to have interaction in addition to social media and Zoom and these kind of talks and stuff that we probably wouldn't have as much anymore. So.
Right. And like Ray said, it's about competing with what's not there. And it depends on your child's ability and their age level and their interests, but you can come up with creative ways to make it work. And of course, there's Facebook groups and online sources for a lot of creative ideas and material.
One thing, and I think we'll probably wrap it up pretty soon. One thing I tell all of my clients when they're divorcing and they're going to start being a co-parent is that as long as you're okay as a parent, your children will be fine. They're going to need your energy, and they're going to be okay if you're okay. So, sometimes as adults, we might not be okay in this situation, but we really need to put that aside when our children are around and try to make the best of what we can.
Right.
Children think that they're safe and secure, and they're not worried about what's happening any more than they need to be as children.
Right.
Right. Makes sense.
Anything else the two of you want to add before we close out here?
I hope that parents plan for some amount of alone time. I have always been a working mother, so being a stay-at-home mom is challenging for me to be in the same space for a long time. So I'm keeping myself as busy as I can, but I'm also finding some alone time to just like go for a drive or stay up late past everybody else and just have some thinking time to veg out on my own. And for a lot of professional parents, I know that that's also very challenging because all of this remote stuff is good, but it's not everything. Like I don't have the long drives to work to like think about things and brainstorm. I don't have that kind of space and freedom that I would normally have. And I don't feel guilty about that. Like I love my kids and I'm taking care of them really well. And I don't feel bad that I need my own space. I think parents have a knack for finding things to feel guilty about. and it's like, we really have to support each other and understand that like, it's okay, and you can make space for yourself and that doing so will make you better the next day. If today is really hard and today is really challenging, get through it, just muscle through it, make some space for yourself, accept things that you can't change about today and plan for tomorrow to be as improved as possible. And then just move on from there. And, everyone is in this and each person has their own perspective. Your child has their own perspective. Your spouse or your co-parent has their own perspective. And it's a lot to juggle and wrestle with. So just don't lose sight of your self-care because that's going to keep you more on the ball, more able to homeschool them, more able to help them through their emotions. If you are so worn thin that you're not managing your emotions very well, then you're not a resource for your kids. So just making that space for yourself, I think, is really crucial.
Right. So yeah, just to, again, to piggyback on that, because there's a lot of good points, a lot of what I was going to say. So thanks, Marcia. But seriously, no. So like number one, just to think back over this conversation, we can't control what goes on in other people's homes. So don't try. Do the best you can in your house with your children expect there are going to be some challenges, expect that you're going to have some tough days, but make the basic structure basically the same. Like we were saying, use a schedule, use some rewards, try to find some of the things that your kids find highly preferred and intersperse access to those things during the day. And if things go horribly awry, well, then that's just what's going to happen. Kids get upset, things go wrong, and you just say, okay, this is just what's going on now, because it's okay to stop an activity when things are going awry and just collect yourself, take a few minutes, and then start again. So I think parents are feeling a ridiculous amount of pressure to do so much. And the bottom line is you just don't have to. Do what you can. Like Marcia said, take care of yourself. And I think that over time, you're just going to get better and better and better at doing what you have to do for you and for your children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's some improvements here that wouldn't have, I think, otherwise have happened, because we do a lot of parent training while parents are working away from home, while they are juggling their kids' school schedules and things like that. And all of that systematic process is extremely valuable. But right now, parents are just in boot camp. It's just, you've just been dropped into, a war zone, make it work. So it's like you're gonna gain some muscles and skills that you didn't have before. And I've had a really interesting discovery of things that I would have never had before, right? So what is it, like desperation breeds creativity or something? So like we will get through this, and you might even find some things that are great that you may not have discovered before.
A lot of improvements can be made. I think I've never done one of these live talks before, and I think it's amazing that we
There you
can share this information with people. So yeah, I think this is all for the best. Thank you guys for joining us, and I'm just going to log off now. Have a great afternoon.
Bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye. Yep, I'm still here.